Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Maine Take. My name is Dana Connors. I am pleased to be your host of this weekly program brought to you by the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. Each week, as you have come to know, with the help of our guests, we take a look at the ideas, the initiatives, and the issues at work in our state, all with the effort to improve the lives and the livelihood of Maine people and our state economy. This week, we have a special program for you. We begin with our Congressman from the 2nd District, Jared Golden. Congressman Golden was scheduled to be with us last week, but as we've all come, or most of us have come to know, that COVID does not pay any attention whatsoever to our schedules. And such was the case with our Congressman, because he was scheduled for last Tuesday. But that was then, and this is now, and we thank him for being with us and grateful that he could find the time to be with us today. So welcome, Congressman. It's a pleasure to have you with us. We understand this may be their last day of quarantining, or maybe it's behind you by a day or so.
I really appreciate your patience and understanding last week, and I was sorry to leave you last minute there. Obviously wasn't expecting that news, but we're good. We're moving past it now. So
please don't apologize. We're grateful for any time you can spend with us, and whether it was last week or today, the issue that I begin with is one that seems to overwhelm every issue and any issue that is before Congress or our lives, even in the state of Maine. Of course, that is the unprovoked invasion of Ukraine by Russia, or as many people call it, Putin's war. And in fact, we see that this has been going on for 26 days now. And frankly, 3.5 million people have fled their home country to other places to escape the horror. It's an incredible experience. And you've taken a leadership role, which we are extremely pleased to see. I think that it was Thursday and Friday preceding the Tuesday that we had scheduled with you, but on that first day, on Thursday, that you, with, I believe it to be 3 Republicans, had issued a letter urging the president to quickly move forward with increasing the domestic oil and gas production here in our country. And then the very next day, you joined 30 other congressmen urging the president again to step up and to provide supplies, be it aircraft or be it equipment, but also provide humanitarian aid. Those are both important issues that I want to discuss with you. But first, I want to begin with the recognition that you participated as a Marine in Afghanistan as well as Iraq. You've seen the face of war up close. What are your thoughts when you reflect on what is happening? And frankly, although it's hard to admit, but you have to acknowledge, there doesn't appear to be any sure sign of ending to this. So it's a lot of anxiety. But when you look at this with your background and experience, share with us your thoughts.
Well, of course, it's not a perfect comparison by any means, Dana. I mean, I of course joined after 9/11 and went to Afghanistan first as part of at that time was a purely counterterrorism mission where we were going after Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda and the people responsible for 9/11. And of course, those were different conflicts too, where we were fighting largely unconventional forces and an insurgency, and like when I was in Iraq, as an example, dealing with a lot of foreign fighters and a lot of small unit type stuff. So what it was not, it was 2 conventional militaries going head to head, like we have seen to date with the Russian military and the Ukrainian military using conventional weapons of war and a civilian population that's caught in the middle. So we're talking about ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, tanks, airplanes, it's a different beast altogether. But I guess what I would say comes to mind is a couple of things. First, I take very seriously being a member of Congress, also a member of the Armed Services Committee, the decisions that are made and whether or not to support those decisions, whether they be made by the president or by our military branch leaders, and when appropriate, when Congress takes a vote. These are big decisions. The stakes are very high, and I think everyone in Congress takes seriously the role of Congress in deciding when we put troops in harm's way. But believe me, no one takes it more seriously than veterans, and particularly those of us that served in combat roles. It's the last thing we ever want to do, but you got to have clear eyes about the decisions that are being made, and are they in the best interest of the country. So that's the first thing that really I've been thinking about. I also just have to stop and think about what I know about conflicts and how innocent people get caught in the middle, and the suffering that comes with that, and the impact on societies. And I certainly, that's weighing heavily on me as I've seen the footage that you've seen in Ukraine. And this, like I said, this is a different beast altogether. I can remember when we were going on a big offensive through a city in Iraq up on the Syrian border. We actually gave about 5 days advance notice to the community. And it was a city a town really about the size of Lewiston, Maine. And we let everyone know we're coming. The Marines are coming in, and it'd be best if you weren't here when we come. That's because we wanted to limit civilian casualties. It was unfortunate and sad. Families moved out into tents, like a tent city popped up several miles out in the desert. And when we went in there, it was, created an opportunity for those families to stay out of the way of what was going to be a fight between us and, an insurgent force of several hundred. Imagine how many more people could have been hurt had we not given them that opportunity. And yet here in Ukraine, we see the purposeful pummeling of cities that are full of tens of thousands of civilians, and so far thousands of civilian deaths. It's terrible what we see Putin doing and his commanders executing on the ground in Ukraine. I don't think we've seen a war like this in a long time.
No, and Godspeed that it get over quickly and never see it again. But the thing that you described, even though the wars are different, perhaps it's not the right word, but the awareness or the courtesy of letting people know in advance separates what you experience certainly from what we're seeing today. As you described, it is horrific in terms of the lives that are taken and the horrific destruction that takes place within the communities. It's just simply, it's hard to imagine it takes place in the world we live in today, but it certainly does.
That's right. And war is always ugly, and incidents are going to happen. People understand that, but when you see that it's intentional in the targeting, like what we see going on, I think Putin and his generals are trying to punish the population in order to try and get the outcome that they failed to get through their initial campaign. Essentially using the civilian population to try and put pressure on the Ukrainian government to meet the demands of Putin is really a terrible thing. We can't let that be successful.
Well, and that experience you had probably speaks clearly to how you've approached this with, as I said at the outset, I think it was on the 10th that you and I think it was 3 other I think there were Republicans joined together to urge our president to move domestic production of oil and gas here in the U.S. And as I recall, there was a 3-part proposal that went with that. Would you share what that included and how it would help?
Yes, absolutely, Dan. For me, it was a 2-part initiative. So I had the opportunity, along with some other veterans who are members of Congress, to meet with and get some feedback from members of the Ukrainian parliament. As you asked before we started the show, was I able to join the briefing or the address from President Zelensky with Congress? Yes, but prior to that, I had also had this opportunity through Zoom to meet with some members of the Ukrainian parliament, and they were describing to me at the time, Dana, a couple of things. One, that despite our best intentions with some of the economic sanctions, there was still a lot of loopholes, and that we weren't cutting off enough revenue from the Russian economy. First of all, we had not yet, by the action of the president, banned the import of Russian oil at that time, but we were about to. But they also were saying anyway, denying Russian banks access to the SWIFT system was actually only being applied to about 7 to 10 out of 300 banks in Russia. And so they were really calling on a tightening of sanctions and what you might call secondary sanctions on countries like China, who might continue to buy oil and other Russian products. And that made a lot of sense to me and some of my colleagues. But as we thought about that, we also realized if we're really going to tighten the screws on the Russian economy and cut off their oil and gas sales, that's going to have an impact on the market. And the market has already been significantly shaken up by the invasion, as well as other things like inflation. And so we felt like we had to, if we were going to advocate for tougher sanctions and more military assistance, which we did in a bipartisan way. I got over 70 members of the House to join me in calling on the president to tighten sanctions, provide anti-air and anti-missile defense systems like the S-300 or MiG fighter jets. The president hasn't done that yet, by the way. We're still pushing for that. But conversely, we said, if we're going to push for this, we got to advocate for protecting our own country, making sure that our energy needs can be met and met affordably, protecting the American people and American businesses. So that was the impetus for the letter that I put together. And I did get several other Republicans to join me. And the gist of it, I'll be as quick as I can, was, first of all, we have heard from people in the energy sector or close to it, that because of the kind of boom and bust of demand, where particularly early on in 20 with COVID lockdowns, we saw a real decline in demand, causing a lot of these oil producers to kind of pull back on production. And now that demand is rising again, they've been hesitant, I think, to go in there and increase production for fear of another downward trend in demand. So we thought that the president and the government could act to bring a little more certainty to those producers by saying, listen, we're going to do some massive releases from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve into the market to try and bring prices down or stabilize prices, but we're going to need to fill that reserve. So we're going to enter into long-term contracts with you to give you a guaranteed government purchase of the oil that you pull out of the ground if you increase your production starting now. Secondly, we thought that it would be a smart idea for the president, similar to what President Trump did at the beginning of the pandemic, to use the Defense Production Act to help smooth that transition to ramping up production domestically. So what did we have in mind? The president can use that authority to get one sector to prioritize sales and assistance to another sector. So right now, the oil producers are having a hard time getting the steel that they need. They're having a hard time getting the sand that they need. When you think about fracking, that's a very important aspect of that. So the president could use that authority to tell those sectors, prioritize your sales to these oil producers for the good of the country's national security. We obviously also thought that just communication was important, and that the president should use the power of the White House to convene an energy summit, to bring in the leaders in the oil and gas industry, bring in other leaders from the renewable energy industry. Let's go for an all of the above approach, starting now, with an eye on short-term solutions and long-term solutions to ensure our energy independence in this country.
Yeah, I think that I'm anxious to hear your response to the feedback that you receive, because it seems to be so logical and productive in the sense of being able to put a damper, if you will, on their success story, where they depend so much on exporting that product. So what's been the feedback? It must have been very positive, I would think.
I was pleased to see that the President's Energy Secretary has started to meet with and call upon oil and gas producers to ramp up production. But I think that they've got to go further. We haven't seen some of those other steps that we have suggested. I'm not the only one that calling for this. Like I said, I had Republican supporters in the House join my letter, but Senator Manchin has issued a similar call in committee hearings in the Senate in regards to using the authorities of the Defense Production Act. So I still think we got to continue to advocate for this, Dana. The feedback from my constituents is very positive. Let's just be honest. It has been a highly politicized issue, energy, in this country for a number of years now. And I don't get it. And I don't think, your members do, nor my constituents. The vast majority of people, I think, realize that it is just common sense that we need to pursue an all of the above energy approach. Yes, invest in renewable energies and in getting those technologies to a place where they can really be competitive and ensure the steady supply of energy that we all need, particularly our manufacturers, but we need it in our homes too. But we cannot simply turn our back on the energy producers of the here and now who we depend on, and that remains oil and gas alongside other high-end producers. So I mean, I'm open to nuclear. I'm open to wind and solar. But I think we got to do what ensures the steadiest supply at the most affordable rates for everyone across the country. And it is an issue of national security as well. And frankly, I think the country should be in a position to not only be energy independent, but energy dominant in the world.
No, you're spot on. You mentioned this, or you referenced it in your comments, but you followed up with the letter that was signed by a whole host of others in Congress that said that we need to do more. There's an urgency for supplies, for humanitarian aid, and that too was timely. What's been your reaction? I know the president has issued additional aid. Was that conclusive enough in terms of what you were looking for, and when you wrote that letter the following day?
No, it isn't. I don't want to be overly critical. I think that the president has done a pretty good job, and I think he's leading in a way that is purposely trying to create a coalition and bring NATO in very tightly to work together against Russia, and sending that unified message is certainly very important in this case. And I like that approach. Our last president talked a lot about how the NATO alliance had to do more for themselves and not just depend on the United States to cut the check, so to speak, for their common defense. And I agree with that. I think that the alliance is really important, though. As you look around the world at some of our potential, what we refer to in the Armed Services Committee as near peer competitors like China and Russia, who have a very different worldview than we do. One of our greatest strengths is our ability to work with others and form a strong alliance. And we're going to depend on that in the world. So the way that the president has done that, I'm impressed. But I think at times they've been overly reactive rather than proactive. And an example of that is myself and my colleagues have been calling on them to do more on the anti-missile, anti-air front. Stinger missiles, which the administration keeps talking about, are great if you are trying to take down helicopters. If you're trying to combat cruise missiles and ballistic missiles being shot at your cities, that's not good enough. So we've got some NATO countries with S-300 systems who might be willing to send those to the Ukrainians, but they're saying to America, we want to know that you're not going to leave us defenseless. And so will you backfill our air defense systems with Patriot missile systems or similar type systems if we give away ours to the Ukrainian government. My letter calls on the president to direct the Secretary of Defense to lead on those types of exchanges. And every day that goes by is another day where we see these cities being destroyed and innocent civilians being killed by these attacks. So, I think that they're being a little too cautious. I know that the president wants to avoid getting us into a direct conflict with Russia. I understand that, but we need to be honest with ourselves about how far we are already in the situation. We are providing javelins that are destroying Russian armor. We are providing Stingers that are bringing down Russian helicopters. I think providing these missile defense systems is not anywhere near as offensive as that, but it could save lives.
Yeah, that's important for sure. And the fact that you said it, that NATO has stuck together, we pray that that continues, because that's critical to the ultimate outcome of this incredible war that we're experiencing. I want to take a couple minutes and switch, because I know, having testified before your small business committee in the House, how important the small business community, businesses are to you. And I know that recently, on or about the same time those letters were issued that we've just spoken of, you had a town meeting with Maine's executive director, CEO of SBDC, Small Business Development Corporation, Mark Delisle. Can you share with us how that went and what the concerns that were expressed? And also, I know that you have put together improvements to the Small Business Development Center, improvement in the form of an act, or improvements in the form of an act. And if you could touch upon that, that would be appreciated as well.
Yeah, well, the small business development centers are funded through the Small Business Administration, the SBA. Yeah. And I'm on the Small Business Committee, as you know. This is my second term on that committee, as it is on the Armed Services Committee as well. So I have been able to be the lead sponsor on legislation to reauthorize the Small Business Development Center program, as well as increasing their budget. They've had a flat budget going on 5 or 10 years now or more, so they need a little bit more room for growth, just like any business would. But I think one of the key parts of my legislation is they aren't able to spend any of their budget on marketing right now. And so as I went around early in 2019, as a new member of the committee, and toured the second district and asked small business owners if they're aware of this service, which is free to small businesses through the SBA, most of the people said no, they'd never heard of it, which is really unfortunate, because they do great work and they're very helpful. And so my bill would allow them to use a small capped portion of their budget on doing outreach through, let's say, Facebook ads and other things, just to get the word out to small business owners in Maine to increase utilization. So for your members, if you don't know what Dana and I are talking about, these are professionals. Often they have been business owners themselves earlier on in their career, and they've taken the opportunity to go work for these small business development centers to provide services to you free of charge. It's funded by the federal budget, and they can do a range of things. If you're looking to become a business owner, you've never done it, but you have a skill set, you want to turn it into a business, they'll help you get that going. They'll help you develop a business plan. They'll help you approach financial institutions to start that conversation about getting the capital you need to get it off the ground. They can do a lot of things. If you have an existing business and you think that you want to pivot into a new market, or if you want to get into trying to do exports, these folks are there for you. They're just waiting on your call, and they'll help you think through how to do this successfully. So it's a great program, Dan. I'm a big fan. I'm excited to be involved in helping get them the resources they need to continue to do their work. But the town hall was great. Mark was very gracious to join me. We take a lot of very unique calls from people, and sometimes they're just asking for help directly with something they're trying to do. sometimes it's a little problem solving. We had a farmer call in who had just committed to clearing some land to reclaim it, and was going to plant to grow some food, and was going to be providing some of that to a local like food pantry. But the increased prices, inflation, with diesel costs up, labor and everything, the whole thing was running well over budget, and he was just looking for help with that. In a town hall like this, we can say, hey, listen, call my office first thing tomorrow morning. We're going to connect you with Mark and the SBDC closest to you, and we'll get to work trying to help you figure this out. So I value those. We're going to do half dozen of them in the months ahead. I get great feedback, though. I guess if I had to pick something, Dan, I'd say the number one thing people were talking about is just rising costs across the board.
Not surprising. Yeah, and it reminds me so much of the town halls that you held during the COVID, particularly during the Paycheck Protection Program, its availability issues surrounding it. Also want to note that when you talk about your passion for small business, that really is Maine. When you use SBA's definition of 500 or less that constitutes a small business, that represents about 98% of our businesses in the state of Maine. So again, it is such a service, and the centers do exemplary work, and it's surprising that they can't market themselves. That's a good move.
A lot of people don't know, my background. Most people know I'm, a Marine that I served. I also grew up, this, Dana. I grew up as part of a family business owned by my mother, passed down to her from her father. We lived right where my parents worked. They walked out the door to go to work. When I was a little toddler, was stumbling around while they were working. So as a result, I know what it's like to work with the family, the types of sacrifices that get made. For instance, I can remember seeing in the off months, because it's a seasonal business, like my parents' paychecks piling up on their desk, because they were prioritizing paying their employees first and making sure those checks cleared, and waiting until the revenue started flowing in the springtime, just trying to piece it together and make things work. Even right now, they've had 2 very good years. They run Springbrook Golf Course, and people wanted to be outdoors in the middle of the pandemic. It's been great for them. Now with costs going up everywhere, they're wondering, is this going to be one of those tougher years where we're going to see less people coming out as they cut back their budgets? I understand the way that business owners think, because I've lived it, and I've watched my folks do it for years. And I also see the values that they bring to the table in regards to how they provide a service to their customers. And those types of things, drove some of the decisions I made early on in 2020. I was very quick to support small businesses through things like the Paycheck Protection Act, because I knew what small business owners and family businesses were going to be going through. Conversely, even though it's been tough sometimes to stand alone or walk a different road, in voting against some of the things this year or this past year, like the American Rescue Plan or Build Back Better, I've expressed my concerns about inflation, about rising costs, and doing too much in too small a period of time. Those are contextual decisions rather than ideological ones. But it's been because of the life experience I've had and the feedback I get from my constituents, Dana.
Well said. And as I've listened to our discussion and your comments today, it's very clear to me that you are on the right committees, be it the armed services or small business. They fit you to a T, as my dad would have said. And we're so grateful that you took the time to be with us today. The best of luck as you get back to Washington, but we know you'll be looking out for us, and for that, we greatly appreciate it. Thank you, Congressman.
Always a pleasure. Thank you. You take care.
And speaking of family, well, today we're going to move to another issue that focuses on the family, and it is a new initiative that is coming to our state very soon. You might even say that we have an exclusive as we do the following interview. I am very pleased to be able to welcome Anna Hicks. Anna is a part of the Governor's Office of Policy Innovation and the Future, but in so many ways, she's always been an advocate for family issues. I first met Anna when she was a chief of staff with the Speaker of the House, Mark Eves. She then had a high priority associated with family, and she's not let go of that. Today, she is a coordinator of the Maine Children's Cabinet. So I welcome Anna. I also want to introduce to you, it's a real pleasure to introduce Sara Redington. Sara is the Director of Strategy and Communications for the Miles Foundation. The Miles Foundation is one that I'm using their words when I say this, supporting strong beginnings for a brighter future. Their investment in education that really promotes the next generation is a key to their existence, and we welcome her as well. So to both of you, thank you for being on today and to talk about this new initiative soon to come to our state that's called the Best Places for Working Parents. Sara, I'm going to ask you to define that vision. What's meant by the best places for working parents? What is that vision? I understand that you are a Texas person, and that's where it all began. And I'm grateful that it's coming to Maine, but tell us what that is.
Thanks, Dana. Thanks for having us today. I'm excited to share more about Best Place for Working Parents. Best Place for Working Parents, what it is a growing community of business leaders that are proving that family-friendly is actually business-friendly through a first of its kind online business self-assessment. It's a 3-minute self-assessment that designates businesses as family-friendly based on just the top 10 policies that have research to prove they not just benefit working families, but also businesses' bottom line.
Oh, that's great. So what they do this analysis, is there kind of it reminds me so much of the best places to work in Maine. And that was such a high energy, enthusiastic type of initiative. Businesses paid for analysis. They then were rated, evaluated. They came together in an evening of celebration. The energy was incredible. It was such a good feeling type of an event. Yours is more focused. It is family. Is it something that is similar in that there is this evaluation? It sounds like it's probably bad choice of words, but an easier one that you can access over the internet. And then what happens?
Yes, so it's actually, we built it together with 100 business leaders here locally in Fort Worth. We had been meeting with business leaders and having multi-sector convenings for the last 8 years to talk about what a whole community approach to education and economic development might look like for Fort Worth. And we had the business community standing up and saying, we believe in the investment in early education and we want to make a tangible impact. And at the same time, we were looking at the data of the changing workforce. Only 27% of families have fathers as the sole breadwinner. 83% of millennials are looking for family-friendly business places. They're actually looking to move jobs, 83% of them, to family-friendly workplaces. And we know how expensive it is for businesses to replace employees. It takes up to 6 to 9 months of that employee's salary. So we actually saw the combination, the opportunity or solution of family-friendly practices as a solution, not just for working parents and families, but also for businesses to attract and retain talent in a really challenging workplace. So what Best Place for Working Parents does in that 3 minutes, it assesses businesses, and a business CEO can take it. We designed it with them in mind, with not very much time to spend on these things, but instantaneously they can see if they earn the designation. And they also get to see in real time a dashboard of how they fare in all the top 10 policies against other businesses of like size and industry. So what's unique to the Best Place for Working Parents assessment is it's actually dynamic and it's updating each time a new business takes it. So businesses can see how they fare.
Wow, that's great. So if I happen to be one of those businesses that met the mark and qualified, then I could use that to market, because I would think it'd be so appealing to families that are faced with this challenge, but yet want to work. And they want to work for a place where they're going to be recognized for their value and the challenges that they have.
Absolutely. And so businesses instantaneously receive a press kit in their email with logos and badges that they can share internally with their current employees and also externally.
Wow. Anna, I can't imagine why. I understand now why you did grab onto this, because knowing you as I do and knowing how important families have been to your mission in life, and now being children's cabinet coordinator, that must fit like a glove.
It fits perfectly, Dana, and really saw it as an opportunity to highlight and really have a positive message around family-friendly practices and recognizing businesses who are making the effort to really support parents to really juggle that challenge of the responsibilities of work and the responsibilities at home. And as Sara said, it really is, we want to have the conversation with businesses. We see this as an opportunity to highlight, to recognize, to acknowledge businesses, and to highlight best practices and innovation. It's really exciting to talk to Sara about the work that's being done in Texas and then across the nation. They're really trying to take the opportunity to spread this to other states, including Washington, Oregon, Iowa, and Maine. So we're one of the first states to take this up, and we are really excited. We see this as kind of a whole range of tools in the toolbox for businesses to think about supporting families. This being one of the pillar of the opportunity to recognize businesses. But the governor, I will say, is really committed to figuring out ways to support businesses and working families, and really does see those as tied together. When she traveled the state during the state economic plan, she heard loud and clear from your members and from employers that childcare is one of the biggest issues that employees and employers are facing. So along with implementing best practices for, best place for working parents, we are also making significant investments in childcare and trying to identify ways that we can support communities to expand childcare and work with businesses to make those investments in their communities as well. So we really see this as a great tool in the toolbox for businesses. And again, just as Sara said, it's a 3-minute self-assessment. A lot of folks are extremely busy. So we're hoping that folks really will take advantage of this as an easy, simple tool to be able to identify themselves as a best place for working parents and really use it. And again, hopefully participate in conversations with other businesses across the state.
Oh, I think you can be assured of that. The minute that people become, or businesses become aware of how much value this presents to them in their marketing for employees. We're all recognizing in Maine that we had a worker shortage prior to the pandemic. It's been exacerbated by the pandemic, but it's also brought forward the value of the strategic plan that was brought together by the state and the communities throughout our state in 2019 that proved to serve us so well during the pandemic, because it hit upon all of those key issues. And childcare was one of them. Broadband was one of them. All the things that have been front and center. So I really commend the insightfulness, the vision that this brings to helping the individual families, but also the business community in the state of Maine. I think it's a great opportunity for both. Sara, I'm going to get back to you for a moment. This started in Texas, as I recall, in January of 2020.
Correct.
That's right. So what have you found? It was then on the cusp of the COVID experience, but it was motivated then. How does it play out today? I'm asking probably an obvious question, because it seems to be more urgent today than ever before. Your reaction, though, not mine.
I mean, I think when we had roundtables with business leaders in 2019, we could never have envisioned how relevant the Best Place for Working Parents platform would be today. But the reality is, through the pandemic, you know, when school resumed in fall of 2020, 80% of the 1.1 million people that left the workforce were women. Today, we're actually in a 33-year low in female workforce participation, but this isn't just a women's issue. Businesses are losing $13 billion annually due to productivity loss through childcare challenges faced by their workforce. So this is a pervasive issue that's not just facing families and working parents, but businesses and our economy as a whole. We actually hosted a convening last year with the Federal Reserve Bank, and the president said the single most important factor for us recovering from this pandemic is getting people back to work in a widespread way. And we know, since women have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, that our recovery strategy, it has to look a little different. But the good news is we surveyed 825 people of what it would take to get back to work. And not surprisingly, 80% of them were looking for family-friendly policies. The 5 policies that they named are all part of our top 10 policies in the Best Place for Working Parents toolkit. They're looking for flexibility. They're looking for childcare financial assistance, paid time off, remote work, and parental leave. And again, that's something that's included in our assessment that we've been promoting since 2019, but I think it's only underscored how relevant it is post-pandemic as well.
Boy, I'd agree with that 100%. One last question that was kind of brought up in the previous section, and that is how Maine is such a small business state. I mentioned that if you use the SBA criteria, 500 employees or less constitutes or defines a small business. That's 98% of our businesses, and 80% employ fewer than 20 people. So we are a small business state, and we say that with pride. This obviously applies to all business. Do you see it as positive for the small business as it would be for the larger business? They're eligible, I would presume.
Yes, absolutely, Dana. And that's why I think Maine is such a great fit for the Best Place for Working Parents program. We actually, across our network, see 65% of businesses that take the assessment are small businesses. So, you know, that goes against traditional thought that only big businesses can offer family-friendly practices. And actually our designation is scaled. The thresholds are scaled by size of business, starting at micro, which is 25 employees and under, into small, medium, and large. So truly this assessment is for anyone. Our policies are wide ranging. We know that on-site childcare is not feasible for everyone, but there's a lot of low or no cost options that we lift up every year. To Anna's point, I mean, this is why Best Place for Working Parents exists, is to lift up the innovations that businesses have implemented that are not only benefiting their working parents, but businesses' bottom line. Some of those low or no cost policies, you know, from dependent care FSA accounts to flexibility to nursing benefits, employee resource groups, and even, you know, aligning with school schedule, giving employees a late start on the first day of school. Lots of great stories like that across the network. Innovations that businesses are implementing that are making a difference in retaining and attracting top talent.
Yeah, I am so pleased that you both came on the program today, because you are strong advocates for something that we truly need and recognize that. And so I thank you both. And Anna, when you are ready looking for help to get the word out, you can count on us. So
that's great. Thank you, Dana, for the partnership.
Yeah, you're both onto something that is very vital, very timely, and very, very important. And it couldn't come at a better time. So I thank you both. And now to close out the show, we'll do our takeaway for this week. And it, to me, has been an informative program, one that is very timely, very important, and one that I hope our viewers have stayed with us for the entire 45 minutes of today. We began our program with interviewing our 2nd District Congressman, Jared Golden. That followed on the heels of about 2 weeks ago when we had the same opportunity to do so with Senator Collins. And it clearly is our intent to follow up with Congresswoman Pingree as well as Senator King in early April. This issue that we've spoken of that's dominated both interviews is not going away. We hope it gets better, but we're concerned that it might get worse. And when we reflect on the issues of the past 2 years, which most of them are still with us today, although we're making progress, we're doing what we can to overcome. To say that it has been overwhelming is to really understate the impact. But when we think of what we've heard here today, it should also remind us of how fortunate we are to have the access and the appreciation of the ability of those who are representing us in Congress. And Maine is a small state, a state that's judged by the number of people that we have in Congress representing us. 2 senators, 2 House members, even I could add that up to the total of 4. And while that is a small number, it's not a small significance when you consider the voice, the leadership, the effectiveness of those 4 who represent us. Is pretty remarkable. As you've heard, they are independent thinkers. They are collaborative in their efforts, and they are true to the task of serving our state, our people, to the very best of their abilities. Some would say that what they do is a thankless job. But we say, thank you for the job you are doing. And today we also learned of another very encouraging, timely, new initiative that's come into our state, aptly titled Best Places for Working Parents. Yes, it does remind us of the best places to work. This is one that will continue, that's easy to access, and recognizes a problem about the family and the challenges placed on the working parents, especially during the COVID experience. How working parents have had to balance work, childcare, and even help their child with their education during those remote periods that they weren't in class. And how the loss of one or both parents from the workforce exacerbates the worker shortage that we have been experiencing for some time. And this program helps in that situation by recognizing those companies, those businesses that not only acknowledge the problem, but they're doing something about it. And those businesses will be recognized and they'll be marketed as the best places for working families. And boy, that is significant at any time, especially at this time. I can't thank enough Sara and Anna for bringing this to the state of Maine, for letting us participate in this program and knowing that it'll truly make a difference. That is the takeaway for this week. I hope you will join us next week when we have another program, this time focused on education. To that regard, we'll close the show as we always do. In a world where you can be anything, please be kind to yourself, but be kind to one another. Stay safe, stay strong. See you back here next Tuesday. Thanks, take care.